This is part 2 of episode 23. I already did an intro in part 1, so is this an intro? Let's take a look at all the jam entries for the Adventure Jam. But first, multiple 2 months of Madness Jams have been and gone. Admittedly, some of the games that entered may have removed their hashtags before we saw them. Our attention was most likely on another jam. The only entry I know of that we haven't already covered was for week 6, Swipe. When a green piece turns yellow, it's time for some fast action. So says the description of the game. This game is manic. It's kind of like a hacking minigame in that it has nothing to do with hacking, and is just a mutation of Simon Says. Simon Says Swipe is for all ages, and has an average rating of 3.1111. The Adventure Jam 2017 ended recently, and there were a total of 125 entries when we first checked, but some of the entries are removing their hashtags from their game pages, which takes them off the list of entries. This is happening at a rate faster than we can get them, so we won't be able to cover all of the game. But those games did leave before voting for the jam ended, so I'm guessing they had no intention of sticking around to see if they won. To give each one the time it deserves, they'll be split across a few episodes. Also, we won't even mention the games that are the devlog only ones to save time. In the order that they are entered, the first game is Mind Boggle. It is a platformer with a nice character design. There was a weird shift in art tone from the first to the second room, perhaps intentional. Clever use of game mechanics, freezing whilst you shoot seems to be a deterrence from spamming projectiles because it made you an easy target for the enemy. The shootouts you have between projectile enemies off screen are genuinely engaging, even though on paper it wouldn't seem fun. Teen 2.7143. Ophia. Weirdly broken movement, glitchy collision. These are the things the developer seems to know about and is working on patching. It has a cool switching between dark and normal world mechanic to solve puzzles. It's nothing that hasn't been done before, but it's still well executed considering the glitches. Looks like the game will be super cool when it's fixed. All ages ratings are off. Polypirate. This is one that shared a lot of its development. So we have copious amounts of screenshots of miscellaneous 3D models, not really very useful on their own though, so let's get the assembled game. Polypirate is a low poly pirate game. Not that the game is pirated, it's about swashbuckling. This is an Unreal Engine game, which means that you'll need a pretty good PC to run it. This game is similar to the Myst series of adventure puzzle games, where you are faced with lots of combination locks and have to look around for entry codes whilst also taking in the environmental storytelling. It's mildly creepy, not because of the low poly gore, but because of the ambiance, constant never-ending creaking wood, droning its way into your brain, whilst there is nobody around, no characters or living things to divert your attention towards. All ages. Rating 3.4375. Elise, a platformer where you collect pages of plot. I understand that this was a jam game, so this is an okay form of storytelling when you have limited time and resources. But generally, the whole notes scattered around the place with world building on them is best suited for non-essential information and storytelling in addition to a primary story that the player is experiencing firsthand. Interestingly, this game has voice acting from playable characters' perspective in addition to the notes. So there is at least a light ludo narrative to carry you through the exploration parts where you're looking for more pages to read. All ages 3.2. Parallel Rewind. Cute little RPG. The writing in this game has good character. The simplified combat system is both a nice abstraction and is almost satire of the typical JRPG model. You literally just trade health for XP by bumping into enemies. This has a nice focus on resource management, but it also cuts out all the insignificance of a variety of attacks that all do the same thing. And then on top of that, you literally lose and gain nothing from killing enemies below your level. It steps up the XP grinding by forcing you to look for bigger and bigger foes to take down. But it also again satirizes JRPGs where weak enemies become insignificant to the player because of how number-focused they are. I haven't even mentioned the plot, which involves a multidimensional time travel mumbo-jumbo. I want to say that people need to stop being mystified by time travel stories. Generally, people presume they're clever because they're difficult to understand. A lot of the time, they do the bare minimum to be confusing and don't pay that off by being interesting. That's not to say that all time travel stories are bad, however. I'm just not going to say that something is good just because it has time travel in it. But this still has good writing and design. All ages 3. Transhuman, a first-person puzzle platformer game where maneuvering your environment is puzzle. The UI and the coloring could use a little tweaking. Green text and red text is just a bad idea. They fight too much for attention, and you really need specific tones of green and red to make them work together. It's honestly not even worth it. On top of that, the colors in the environment are a little strange. It's somewhere between not enough texture variety or not enough minimalism. I can't really tell what the dev intended. It's good that they had a limited palette, that light grays and the dull blue work nice together for creating a clinical environment. For the gameplay, if you find yourself hopping around a lot and jumping off of things in first-person games to make movement more engaging, this game is sort of doing that. The game. All ages 3.5714. Klaus, a robot maze game about sorting various things into the correct containers. This game has all the locked door tropes. It's color key syndrome, combination doors, pressure switch door. It's sort of like a Zelda dungeon with lots of puzzles. If you like puzzles and dungeon exploring, it's an engaging experience. And I must say that carpet design is on point. Brilliant floor patterns. Considering the camera is always looking at the floor, each room has enough variation in carpet to give them personality and make finding your way through them that much easier. All ages 3.8571. Delicate Stushies. Right away, you're confronted with a very entertaining yet unlikable character making a very convoluted drug exchange, and then suddenly you're watching a Duchess moonlight as an alchemist whilst her husband is waiting for her to get ready to go out for the evening. The writing in this game is incredibly eccentric, and if you have a big enough vocabulary, you'll realize how funny it is. And if you don't have the vocabulary, it functions as a surrealist humor. There's a lot of crude language that contrasts with the big words the characters keep using. A lot of the time in humor, crude language is used as a punchline or just a replacement for wit. Here, it's in the punchline, but it's not the punchline itself. More a representation of the stage curtain falling down for a moment as the characters lose their patience or run out of stamina to keep pulling strings of incredible vocabulary out of the air. I just want to see this developer continue to make incredibly written experiences. Mature 3. RR. Do you remember those old Flash Escape the Room games? This plays a little like one of those, except it has a nice surrealist minimalism character. The name seems to reflect the dual-sided quality of the game's puzzle, where you have one puzzle room on side A of a cassette and another on side B, and the name has a backwards R and a forward R. Oh, that clever logo stuff. It's mature rating 2. Chook and Sosig, I guess is how it's pronounced. A very nicely put together point and click game. You play as a cat that wants to join a goblin role-playing club. This game pulls off an aesthetic very nicely, and the character interactions are just all around pleasant. All ages rating 4.3529. Sidekick High. This one has the air of classic LucasArts era point and click games about it. This takes the approach that we were all thinking about when we watched those kinds of shows or movies. And that it would be like going to school in abattoir? I don't know, Ma wrote this. You play as a bunch of students that desperately want to escape the school before they inevitably have a terrible accident whilst learning to do incredibly dangerous things. All ages 4.4. Spin Cycle. A game primarily set in a laundromat, where you use a wormhole to another universe to talk to a girl you like. Seems pragmatic. This game does a beautiful job with its limited color palette and has a very nice overall aesthetic. All ages 3.8571. Legend of Grembo. A self-aware platformer. A game with an intentionally terrible protagonist, and that's where the main conflict in the plot comes from. It's one of those games that definitely has an audience, but will inevitably attract certain game snobs to have the joke go over their heads. This game has a nice atmosphere and personality. All ages 3.3333. Kingdoms Will Fall. This one has very sleek stylized vector graphics. It's sort of an open world-ish RPG beat 'em up. A peculiar combat system that seems very mash prone, What it really needs is some knockback when you get a hit or when you hit enemies. The character design is nice, but clashes a lot with the neon green grass of the first area. Teen 2.3333. Why is it there's so many games with triple or quadruple 3 ratings in the decimals? It's a really odd rating to have. Anyways, a friendly venture. This one was clearly inspired by a game that was inspired by the Earthbound series. It would be unnecessary to compare it against that, but if you like that game, you know there is a very good chance you'll also like this game. With most inspired games, they tend to miss out some of the fundamental elements of games in general. I can say this one has a very cohesive visual aesthetic, a pleasant atmosphere, and the developer did seem to know what they were doing. So it's not just a shoddy Undertale clone. All ages 4.1053. This is enough games for now. We'll cover even more in part 3. Bye, I guess.